If you ask most people in Britain what's going wrong in the UK, they'll usually mention high taxes, the NHS crisis, housing costs, student loans, or inflation. Almost nobody says electricity, and that's shocking because right now the UK has some of the highest electricity prices in the developed world, and it's quietly damaging the entire economy in ways most people don't see. Businesses are struggling, heavy industry has been shrinking for years, and investors look at UK energy costs and hesitate. Energy is the foundation of modern wealth. When it becomes expensive, everything built on top of it becomes fragile. To understand this, we need to separate energy into two types: direct fuel like petrol and heating gas, and electricity, which powers homes, offices, factories, transport systems, and increasingly data centers. On petrol and industrial gas, the UK is not wildly out of line with much of Europe. But on electricity, especially for businesses, prices have been among the highest in the developed world. A decade ago, this was not true. In the early 2000s, UK electricity prices were much closer to other advanced economies. So what changed? High electricity prices don't just mean painful household bills. They push factories to relocate, they increase production costs, they feed inflation across supply chains, and they slow down electrification, which ironically makes climate targets harder to reach. When electricity is expensive, companies hesitate to switch from gas boilers to electric systems, and drivers hesitate to move to EVs. The transition becomes slower and more expensive. Many analysts point to the UK's marginal pricing system. Every half hour, electricity generators bid into an auction, saying what price they can produce power for. The grid operator stacks those bids from cheapest to most expensive and accepts enough to meet demand. Everyone gets paid the price of the most expensive generator needed. So if solar bids at 5 pence, wind at 8 pence, and gas at 20 pence, and gas is required to meet demand, everyone effectively gets paid 20 pence. That means gas often sets the wholesale price. When global gas prices surged after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, UK electricity prices surged too. But here's where the story gets deeper. Other European countries also rely heavily on gas. The Netherlands, Italy, and others frequently use gas to balance their systems. Yet their retail electricity prices have often been lower than the UK's. So gas alone cannot explain the gap. The real structural issue lies in the grid and system design. Much of Britain's wind capacity is in Scotland and offshore in the North Sea, while large population centres are in southern England. The grid does not always have enough capacity to transport all that cheap wind power south, so wind farms sometimes get paid but are told to reduce output because the electricity cannot physically travel to where demand is highest. Then the system has to procure replacement electricity closer to London, which is often more expensive. These balancing costs have been rising and are projected to keep rising if grid upgrades lag behind renewable expansion. Decades ago, coal and gas plants were spread more evenly across the country, so transmission bottlenecks were less severe. Today, renewable generation is geographically concentrated and the grid has not fully caught up. Now compare this with the United States. The US also uses marginal pricing markets in many regions, and gas plays a major role there too. But the US benefits from massive domestic gas production thanks to the shale revolution, which keeps gas prices structurally lower than in Europe. In addition, the US has larger internal energy resources, more space for solar expansion in sunnier states, and in many regions, lower overall electricity prices for industry. That's one reason why energy-intensive industries like chemicals, steel, and advanced manufacturing have found the US more attractive in recent years. When American electricity prices are lower and gas is abundant, industrial competitiveness improves. The UK, by contrast, is more exposed to international gas markets and has fewer domestic fossil fuel buffers. So while both systems use similar pricing logic, the underlying resource base and infrastructure capacity create very different outcomes. This leaves the UK unusually sensitive to global energy shocks. Now step back and ask the bigger question. Why is Britain so dependent on gas for electricity in the first place? Nuclear power exists but has been slow and extremely expensive to expand. Solar has become much cheaper globally, but the UK's sunlight levels limit output compared to southern Europe or the American Southwest. Wind is strong in Britain, especially offshore, but wind is variable. When the wind drops, something must fill the gap, and that something is usually gas. Storage technology is improving, but not yet at the scale required to eliminate gas dependence. So the UK sits in a difficult middle position. Ambitious climate targets, significant renewable build-out, but still heavy gas reliance and grid constraints that increase costs. Yet here is the surprising twist. Despite high electricity prices and falling total energy consumption over the past 2 decades, UK GDP per capita has remained relatively resilient. In fact, Britain produces more economic output per unit of energy than most large advanced economies. Normally, as countries get richer, they consume more energy. The UK has partially broken that relationship, becoming more energy efficient while maintaining output. That suggests something powerful. If electricity became cheaper and more abundant, even modestly, the upside for growth could be significant because the economy is already relatively efficient. Think of it like a high-performance engine running on restricted fuel supply. Increase fuel flow and performance could rise quickly. For American viewers, this is also a warning and a lesson. Energy affordability underpins industrial strength. The US advantage today partly reflects resource abundance and scale. But grid constraints, regulatory delays, and regional price spikes are appearing in some US states too. The UK shows what can happen when infrastructure and market design fail to adapt fast enough to structural energy shifts. So when people debate Britain's economic future, they often focus on Brexit, taxes, or public services. But energy may be the hidden lever. Fix the grid, reduce exposure to volatile gas prices, streamline infrastructure expansion, and electricity prices could fall over time. Ignore those structural issues, and high costs continue to squeeze households and industry. Energy is not just another policy area, it is the base layer of economic power, and the countries that solve this puzzle first will likely gain a major competitive edge in the decade ahead. If you found value in this and want more deep, honest breakdowns like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support genuinely motivates me to keep making powerful content for you.